And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. I'm Pete Belcastro. This is Alice Lema. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon. We get together with you once a week to talk about our favorite subject, which is Southern Oregon real estate. And my goodness, we're here in mid-February, Alice, and there's a lot of activity going on as we're getting ready for the really busy season still ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a really, really busy one, even more so than we thought because of the low interest rates.
Low interest rates and a lot of demand. People still want to come here and live, which is good and bad as we've learned over the years, I think, as well.
Yeah, but we're finally starting to get more listings, little by little, week by week.
Well, we're going to find out. Colin Mullane, he's the fellow down there at the far end of the table. Colin is a broker with Full Circle Real Estate in Ashland, been on our show many times before, past president of the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, by the way, which is sponsoring today's show. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, Pete. How are you?
Yeah, market good. Well, tell us what you're seeing as well, because you hear Alice and I yap about this stuff.
Yeah, you guys are nailing it. It's exactly right. We're seeing the inventory levels pick back up. We're having lots of conversations with sellers about what 2020 is going to look like and what the market's going to do. Great to see the interest rates at or below where they were last year, and still a lot of buyer demand because guess what? It's a cool place to live.
Yeah, and we're getting into that time of the year now where it's that cycle, those 6 selling cycles that we talk about. We're at the bottom of it. Winter starts to come back up, and then spring really takes off. So, do you agree with Alice that we're going to continue to get more listings, more choice for consumers and buyers?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things to watch this year, which we saw last year, was particularly in the Ashland market, which is timely for today's conversation, is a lot of our sellers remembering the 2018 market and the fire season put their homes on the market very, very early on. And so it looked like this time last year we had almost 75% more homes on the market than the previous year. So it's likely that we'll see that trend continue, which tells us that the consumers are concerned, but that also that they are wanting to be aware of things like living in an area where there may be susceptibility to fires and what that looks like.
Well, I'll tell you, in the middle here is Katie Gibble, and Katie is with Ashland Fire and Rescue. So you got to get right up there. Don't forget that. Right up there, it's Katie.
It's
we
my
want to
friend.
hear you. It's your friend. And Katie's from Ashland Fire and Rescue, and a program, I remember back in the day, we go back a long ways in Ashland, you and I do, but a program called Firewise was started by the city. I mean, Ashland has been really far ahead, I think, of most other places because of just this location, right, and being in a fire zone.
Yeah, we've been thinking about it for quite some time, and we've Firewise has been around for a while, and we have a lot of Firewise communities, and we were very fortunate to be approached by the fire department in saying, how do we take this to the next level, and what does that look like in terms of preparing the population generally? And I think one of the most exciting pieces about the conversations we've had is that we're leading the way on a conversation that really should be a national conversation. So we're hopeful that we will set an example of how realtors can plug into the community with the local fire departments in a way that makes the community more aware and hopefully withstand some of those bigger fire dangers that are out there.
Well, and Katie, and for those who are listening that don't know what Firewise is, can you give us a little overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So Firewise, a little closer
Yes,
even?
yes,
Oh my
ma'am.
goodness.
Here you go. We
We're
wanna hear
really
you.
close
There you
friends
go.
now.
Yeah.
How's that?
There you go.
Perfect.
So Firewise is a program that if you are a community that is concerned about wildfire, you can sign up online. It's a national program, and all it takes is a concerted effort between members of your neighborhood that are concerned about wildfire and want to do something about it. So you can sign up on the website, and all it takes is one event a year that relates to wildfire. That could be your community walking door to door, educating your neighbors on how to reduce wildfire risk around home, be it vegetation, preparing for an evacuation, what to do in the event of wildfire smoke. And then they just have to put in a certain number of hours per household to do work related to reducing wildfire hazard, cutting back shrubs close to your home that are flammable, preparing an evacuation for your neighborhood, and tracking those hours and entering them in at the end of the year, and that helps you become a Firewise community. And when you've done that year after year, you get a plaque that says, hey, I've been a Firewise community. Yeah. And so Ashland started their Firewise Communities program back in 2010, 2011. They started engaging with individual neighborhoods at the highest risk. And now, over the past almost decade now, Ashland has the most Firewise communities within an individual city in the entire country.
Wow.
So we have 35 Firewise communities. I just met last week with another HOA that's interested in becoming Firewise. So we are a high concentration of Firewise communities and continue to grow.
Oh, good for you.
What's so
Good for
funny about that
Ashland.
is that you have all these plans. It's something you never want to implement. right?
Yeah.
And you never want to implement all these plans that people have because you don't want. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, totally. But the truth of the matter is, these communities had fire long before people started moving into them, and so learning to live with fire, with wildfire, is what makes the Firewise community a good place to get started. Because ultimately, only some neighborhoods are engaged enough to become a Firewise community, but those are the examples that then spread outward to the entire community. And that's the same thing we're trying to do with RVAR here in terms of realtors.
I would think the potential, I mean, of residences or population who lives in the interfaces and woodlands and fire zones, Ashland's only a tiny part of that whole thing. So this sounds so wonderful, but geez, there's so much more that is not happening, right?
There's a lot that's been done. I think one of the things we can all agree on is we've been very fortunate that Ashland hasn't been touched by fire the same way that so many communities around us have.
You're right.
And
You're
so
absolutely right.
That's, I think, where the heightened awareness is what can we do to help make sure that our community stays as safe from fire as possible. And I think everyone readily acknowledges just how exposed the Rogue Valley and most parts of Oregon and many parts of the western United States are to this, and sometimes it's good fortune, but there's no doubt that being prepared and being engaged and understanding the nature of wildfire and how we can prevent and live with it is something we absolutely have to be mindful of, and prevention is always better than cure. And so partnering with the local fire department, partnering with the city of Ashland, the mayor has been on board, we've met several times, and I think one of the best experiences I've had from this entire dialogue is that I have a greater awareness of fire, other than what I've read in the newspaper like everybody else, to actually be able to say, if I can impart some of this information as a realtor to my clients in a way that maybe the fire department couldn't just because they weren't engaged with that client in that way, we're bringing something meaningful to the table. So we're selling about 5 to 10% of the entire Ashland market, which is like a regular market, every year. So after 10 or 20 years, we'll be able to hopefully engage on a much more one-to-one basis that will help cross over some of the areas maybe the fire department weren't able to penetrate, and bring that awareness up, and that organic nature of engagement will take over.
Yeah.
Well, and what a wonderful community event to not only get to know your neighbors, but to get some training so that when there is an emergency, you're not as panicked, you know what to do, and you know that the people that are around you know what to do as well.
Yeah, totally. And engaging early, however that takes place, whether it's through the fire department, through the realtor that's helping you purchase this home in this new community, having that awareness that wildfire is a risk where you're living early on is the key to success when it comes to when the emergency is happening on the ground. So wildfire is everyone's fight, and our goal is to engage as many people as possible early on when they move to Ashland or to the Rogue Valley.
And it's really good to hear that the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors is doing this or supporting this, because we're like the front lines with people. I mean, I've had clients come in where maybe want to live here, and I always bring up fire. I don't know
I always bring it up too.
When I'm with clients. And said, no, I really don't want to live here because of that. And so realtors really need to we're like the front lines of this, to me.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, there's been an evolution in the conversation that occurred when we first became aware that they wanted to talk to us as realtors and how we might be able to engage to where we are now. And there's a better understanding of how we engage with our clients and what we can actually do to impact them. Where the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors really sees the benefit is we are wanting and willing to make this grow beyond just Ashland. I mean, initially, this is an Ashland conversation, but everyone is in a community in Ashland. Talent is just as exposed, parts of Medford, Central Point. Everybody has this, and the more that we knit together as a community and as a county, the more beneficial this will be. So we're really looking at this being the seed, but absolutely the Association of Realtors wants all realtors across Jackson County and beyond to engage with this and make every community safer. So there's a much bigger benefit, and we're really happy to run with that and use our resources as an association to take it beyond just the city limits of Ashland, which we think is important.
Well, and I think the other point is we've had the benefit or dismay, however you want to put it, of watching some really horrendous, traumatic fires around us, and then some of the problems that they've had in Australia, but we can learn from that, because just because you live in town doesn't mean you're immune. Because of wind, because of embers.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
Yeah, so just because you live in Medford doesn't mean that you're going to be immune from a fire.
Well, you had here, Alice, hold this. Okay, anyway, here. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a Medford wildfire hazard zone. Okay, and like here's the city of Medford, and all around it, literally surrounding it, are these these hazards, wildfire hazard areas. Totally engulfs Jacksonville. Go out, dry out toward Rouge, Williams, Sam's Valley.
And probably Butte
Eagle
Falls,
Point.
huh?
All
Yeah.
these valleys, one way in, a lot of them.
Yep.
One way in. When we talk fire, we have escaped. You are absolutely right. We have been, thank goodness we don't have strong winds here. But we have escaped so far.
Yeah.
But I worry that we continue to build into the forest interfaces. We continue to do this.
There's some good news. There's some good news and some bad news there.
All right.
Building into the forest interface obviously is a challenge, and we've had a heightened awareness of that for quite some time. The good news is that new construction has a much higher standard that they're being built to, specifically with
Yes.
fire in mind. And so the city of Ashland passed an ordinance last year specifically related to how fences could be attached to homes, so that now they have to be metal instead of wood. And so we're getting more and more mindful, and over time that will get better. But it's those communities that have been around for 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 and some years that absolutely weren't being built. I don't think they even thought the houses would last more than 100 years when they were built, but they're still here. And so how do we make them safe? What do we look at? What kind of plantings can we make if we're going to put a tree down? So if you're coming from an area where you just love spruce or pine trees and you want to plant one, hopefully we can get information to you that says that may not be the best idea given where you're living, but you could accomplish the same level of beauty by planting this tree, which is more immune to a forest fire interface potentially. So that education is going to be key, and that's what we really want to see. And we've had some really interesting conversations because we know how much Ashland loves their trees, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to take a tree down, that can be difficult.
Yeah.
And so there were some potential clashes. Like, well, you can't say we can't have these kinds of trees, and then say you can't cut them down. So we've actually had some really good dialogue in helping the city themselves understand some of their own unique challenges that they're overcoming, and saying, you know what, this is a bigger issue. Fire is a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And so let's take care of that. We can't say we love our trees, but but we want to be safe from fire and not make some changes.
Yeah,
And they
So
did.
where do we get the list? Like, how do we know what's flammable and what's not?
Well, it kind of depends. So for the city of Ashland, we actually had a stakeholder group come together and identify the trees and shrubs that would be on what we call the prohibited flammable plants list. So we have a list that we enforce if people plant new plantings as of October of 2018 and we learn about it. We go up to the homeowner and say, hey, just so you know, there is a reason that these are on the prohibited
Really?
flammable plants list.
Prohibited. Would you say it again?
The prohibited flammable plants list. Yeah, and you can Google that in Ashland. Yeah.
We will Google that.
But better yet, the list that we love giving out a lot more than the prohibited flammable plants list is the Firewise plant list. So for every prohibited flammable plant we have, there are a dozen plants to choose from that are fire-wise. They are lower likelihood of ignition. And so we prefer to hand out that lovely list of options as opposed to saying, here are the big no-nos. And that's a part of the conversation that we can have early on.
Yes, I wish you could put those things into like the Grange Co-op or some places that sell the stuff.
Totally.
And have them marked. This is what'd you call that again?
The prohibited flammable plants list.
If you could get, seriously, if you could get the growers of the plants and the companies to label them that way, it would be so much easier for people to buy.
That's an interesting
what is
idea.
really off on the list instead. Because I go in there and I just buy because it looks pretty, not what's really smart, and that's really stupid. Anyway, we got a break coming up here. We got to come right back here. The Real Estate Show here in KCMX. We're coming right back after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema with you here today. Thanks for joining us here in mid-February. We're talking fire. You know, we may be here in mid-February with Colin Mullane, by the way, from representing the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors and a realtor in Ashland, and Katie Gibble from Ashland Fire and Rescue. Katie is the Fire Adapted Community Coordinator. I love that title.
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful, but it's a very important one as we talk, wildfires and development and wildland fire zones, and we want to educate our community because we don't want to have a disaster. I think that'd be the worst thing. All of us, I know that the realtors have, we've all had clients, friends who become friends who have suffered out of that Paradise or Reading fire, right? I mean, people are still
Absolutely.
Still there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the biggest. We say that we live in a community where we don't thankfully suffer from earthquakes or volcanoes or hurricanes, things that cause devastation and flooding. And of course, we have some levels of all of those in smaller communities. But this is the one threat that we can all now readily acknowledge, that fire is ever present in our community. and all the communities around us, and what can we do to prepare, and not paying attention to it and not acknowledging it is a recipe for disaster. So we want to get in front of it. We really do. We want to coordinate with the city and with the fire department to make it happen.
Well, and as regular citizens, is something that we can be proactive in.
Yeah.
And we were just talking earlier about the plant list. How do people find out where the list is?
Well, a lot of local growers, landscapers, big box stores, a lot of those folks are knowledgeable to some degree of the fact that there are flammable plants. And so just engaging with those people that own those stores or are working there, it's a ground up effort. You know, this is something that we all need to have this higher level of engagement. And so if you're that proactive homeowner asking, then that's going to kickstart all of that effort as well. So a group effort.
In our legislature, you know, who you deal with, I know through the political action parts of this thing, the legislature's supposed to spend all this money. They're supposed to reduce wildfire hazards. Why can't we get them to identify these types of plants and things like that so people know what to buy? It would sure make your job a whole lot easier if those types of things were identified for consumers. That's something maybe we ought to take that on.
Well, I would like to
really
get,
like
is there a PDF? Can we just have the list?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can give you the entire list, but if you just Googled Ashland prohibited flammable plants list, you would have no problem finding it for yourself.
Alice is writing that down.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you when we're done, she's going to go on to find the Ashland prohibited plant list.
But I'd like the other list, though, too. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
One of the great segue into this piece is one of the things we've been working on with the fire department in the city is an informational brochure that we as realtors are going to be able to hand to our clients. And so we're about 90% of the way done. We're still working on some of the graphics on that. It will help the homeowner understand what defensible space is, how they can prepare their home better for being fire-wise, and bringing that knowledge base up, and even opening up the possibility for an inspection of
well, that's what I was going to say. Don't you, Katie, go do that, right? You'll go in Ashland right now. You'll go to somebody's property and walk with them and show them or whatever if they want this type of information for their property, right?
Yeah, totally. Just this morning I had a homeowner call saying, hey, I just moved into town. My neighbor advised me to give you a call.
Neighbor, yeah.
That's
great.
great.
The neighbor advised you,
Yeah. And so it's a one-man show. It's me and maybe someone else from the fire department that can dedicate some time during the week to go out and spend an hour with that homeowner, be it a new homeowner or someone that's just getting on board with concern about wildfire. And I make a point of making sure that owner can walk around the house with me so we can point out individual things that can be improved around the home to reduce your wildfire risk and identifying those risks in the first place.
Colin Mullane, think about this one, you guys, about this. Take what she's just said, and we put it over both Jackson and Josephine counties, and people have that ability to come into my property to help me identify and look, someone new who's just moved in, the neighbor has told them. We hear that all the time.
Absolutely. That's what makes us a community. I mean, we're connected in that way. I do want to go back to the informational piece. One of the other components of this is that the realtors are not just here to help understand how to connect with the client and the consumer, but we have that pamphlet. There will also be a digital version of that pamphlet where there will be links that will be more consistently updated, which is the wonderful thing about being online, where those kinds of lists about the flammable plants and inflammable plants will be available to the public, as well as measures that they can take to help make their home more fire safe. And we're also going to provide a class, I think, around about 3 hours for realtors that will help them understand the various places they can go for information for their clients so that we can continue to be that resource.
That's wonderful.
So this will be a really all-encompassing thing. And even though we're going to heavily emphasize the Ashland market initially, our hope and expectation is that we'll be able to reach beyond that into the broader community and those outside, because like we talked about earlier, fires don't understand city limits.
Yeah, they don't. And so how do you think you do that in the rest of the county? I mean, who are there other groups, or I mean, maybe Katie may know, is there other groups who are doing somewhat similar to what you've been doing with the goal of being able to do what this program does?
Oh yeah, totally. So just to continue plugging into this program that we're working on with RVAR, a component of this program is also going to be bringing in a 2-day NFPA course that would teach regional inspectors about how to perform a wildfire hazard assessment as well. So as I mentioned earlier, in Ashland, it's just me and maybe one other person that's able to go out and do those hour-long assessments. But the goal is to increase the capacity throughout the region. And so we hope to bring in a 2-day course that would allow inspectors to then go forth and be able to offer this inspection on their own.
Oh, that's really
what kind of
interesting.
inspector?
Oh, as soon as that word came up, inspection. Like,
The professional home inspection.
Like the home inspectors
home
would have
inspection.
this as an additional accreditation?
Totally.
Oh,
Yep.
that's wonderful.
Oh,
That is a great idea. When is that happening?
We don't know. It's a pretty expensive course to offer, and so it's a matter of finding the funds to budget that sort of thing. But ultimately, our goal is to, like I said, increase the capacity. That way, ultimately, our teammates, these realtors, can say, hey, if you're interested in this, reach out to the fire department. We have a waiting list that is a couple of months behind. We're trying to catch up in these off months, which there is no off month in wildfire anymore.
No.
But being able to hand that off to an inspector who's equally certified to do these sorts of things will relieve a lot of pressure and increase the capacity throughout the region to get this work done.
Think about
Now,
that.
Alice is thrilled with this because she's an inspection person. You know that. I mean,
And insurance.
And insurance.
You can never have too much of either.
Well, that's another inspection. Do you see? Okay, because Colin's also involved in the documents. That you fill out and all the kind of documents. Do you see a check box saying this property is in a wildfire hazard zone someday, and
Or do you
therefore it has
belong
to
to
have,
Firewise?
and you have the ability to have an inspection done on it like you do in a regular house. You see that coming?
Like
There
a
may be an
disclosure?
evolution in that direction. The challenge is that there are so many different authorities that oversee not just the city of Ashland, the fire department, but our industry, that at this point there isn't a consistent approach in terms of how we could put something on the state books and make it. I mean, do we really want to make it state required? What we want to do is, I think the most effective way to achieve what we're trying to achieve is consumer engagement. As soon as I tell you you have to, there's a resistance. As soon as I say, let's partner, here, I'm going to give you some information, I'm going to give you such good information, you're going to want to know more, and then you want to participate in it. That's the approach we're hoping to take. And if we lead by example, the consumer's going to go, before I do this, I want to know more about that. And if we can do that, we'll accomplish the goal, because then you've engaged the consumer, you've engaged the participant, and it's not just required. And so we have lead-based paint disclosures.
I
They
was
drive
just saying
people
it's very
nuts.
similar to that. Yeah.
Except that most people are kind of like, lead paint, I don't have kids or whatever, it's not a big concern for me, and maybe it is and maybe it's not. Lead paint is absolutely a big nationwide concern, and way too many people are affected by it, and that was the outcome of it. But this is something that is ever present, that every single spring and summer we are entering into a brand new fire season. We start from scratch. We have no idea what it's going to look for. So I think the goal and what we talked about is to try and create some measurable results that say, where were we in 2020?
And standards, yeah.
And where are we in 2030? Did we make a difference? And the hope is yes. And I hope that the fire department will be able to measure that along with the realtors so that we can turn around in 2030 and say, we remain incident-free, and this is why. And that's the example we're hoping to set.
And don't you think that the property values will go up if you've done these inspections and you've made these changes to your own property? Your property will be not only safer but more valuable. I could see that as a possible outcome.
Yeah, especially as fire becomes more and more on people's minds as they move to communities. They're looking for these types of homes. I think we've had the discussion about sort of like LEED certified housing and having a similar appeal to moving into a house that has a low fire risk.
Well, anything new in Oregon is certainly being built to that standard of net zero.
Certainly
right? Isn't that?
Yep. And if the consumer, that's the thing, the consumer likes and enjoys when they feel safer in their home, if those options are available. So if you're able to go net zero in terms of saving energy and having a lower carbon footprint, if that's your desire, then that's great. But I think that there's absolutely, to Alice's point, a value in being able to say to the consumer, you are more likely to resist in a fire event in that house than you are in that house. That adds value, there's no doubt.
Do you two think that we're going to see a reduction in construction because of these new rules that went into effect where they have to be built to net zero? Do you sense that anywhere?
California did it. You're going to
California
build
just
to
did it.
build.
I think they're going to build anyway, right?
They're going to build. The good thing about the net zero piece is you're preparing the home to be net zero. It doesn't have to be net zero just yet. That's coming.
Okay.
Over a period of time. Thankfully, the costs associated with that have changed dramatically. I mean, that might have been a $60,000 difference on a $400,000 house 10 years ago. It might be more like a $12,000 difference now on a $400,000 house. That's a much easier pill to swallow. The consumer benefits from it. We always prefer when the consumer gets to drive the decision matrix as opposed to the legislature.
Yeah.
But is it the end of the world? No. Will the consumer benefit? Yes, but I think that the getting to the more volunteer side of what we can build in Ashland to be a safer home and coordinating with the city of Ashland when they make building code changes that help protect us in that way, those are positive changes, and we're happy to be able to be included in
Well,
it.
and if it's adding value and the value is being transmitted out to the market, the builders acknowledge that. They're business people. So I think even though it may add some expense to the final product, final home, I think the builders are going to want to be on board with it.
And part of the reason you want to be fire safe is that I was talking with Brian Almquist this week, who's a former city administrator in Ashland. He was telling me of a friend that he had in Paradise there were 2 houses in this whole area that were saved. Somehow they didn't burn. And they said that the friend who lives in the house, there's no value. Absolutely zero value in that house because nobody wants to live there. There's nothing. There's nothing around it.
When you look at that level of
What a shame.
devastation, that's a whole other extreme.
Totally different deal.
That really was very close to home in many, many ways. Like we talked about it, all of us know somebody that was affected by that. That was an entire town. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing is what I think the consumer forgets is these wildfires often start by pure accident.
Yeah.
Nobody was intending to start that. Nobody wanted it to start. And it started. And there's nothing that says Ashland isn't as susceptible to accidental fire starts at the worst time of the year.
Well,
that's
and
what
we
we're
had
preparing
one
for.
down by the freeway years ago, remember? And it was an accidental fire started by somebody, because you're allowed to walk on the freeway in Oregon. And isn't
Burned
that
11
what
houses.
happened?
Burned 11
Right,
houses.
right. And it happened fast.
Yeah.
Those houses were gone.
One of the things we're blessed with not having great big winds here like they do in California, but we do get them.
And we can.
But when we get them, that's when that's when the
fall.
danger comes.
Yep.
Well,
Exactly.
but doesn't
So-
fire create its own wind at some point?
Yeah, the larger fires do. There's just this need for the fire to get more oxygen, and so it starts pulling in oxygen from the outside. So you do get winds associated with those larger fire events.
bad stuff all the way around. We don't want to see that happen around here, and that's why you're here, Katie, to help
Exactly.
do that. And I'm really happy that the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors is taking the opportunity to do this. I think it's long overdue.
Yeah.
It affects so many thousands of our neighbors in so many properties and so much value. So I think that's a really good deal. We've got one more break coming up here. Today we're with Colin Mullane and Katie Gibble. We're talking about fire safety as the fire season is approaching us. It'll be here before we know it. Pete and Alice, we are coming right back after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show here on KCMX News Media 880 and YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema with you here today. Thank you for joining us as we've continued our march into February here and getting ready for, I can't wait for the rest of the spring and summer.
It's like
gonna be a
spring
big year.
already.
It's,
It's like it's here.
I think I hope we have we had a great year last year. Thank you. We had no fire. You know, we really were so blessed. We had a great water year. And I tell everybody that when we have a lot of water, everybody's happy.
It helps.
It makes everybody happy. You know,
Yeah.
we don't fight among. We just go and it makes everything pretty. The only crazy thing was hemp this last year, and that was about the biggest kind of boo boo in all of real estate. Don't you think?
Well,
the whole year?
and that's, I think, still just, it's an industry trying to get its legs under itself, and some of it worked out, some of it didn't. There was a lot of learning. There's a lot of information exchange now among the farmers that are still wanting to do it. So I think this year will be better.
Yeah,
And it was definitely good for our commercial properties, the storage units, and not storage units, but the warehouses.
Well, they're hiring people. Remember when they were clipping cannabis? They were hiring all these people to do that. Now they're doing the same thing with hemp. I mean,
they're
hundreds of people are being
W-2
employed by this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
shocking.
And they're legit, and they can put their money in a bank,
Yeah.
unlike cannabis. So
They're being paid $20 an hour. It's the way.
yeah, just try to get your hair
Let's go.
cut during harvest, because all the hairdressers are clipping hemp.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Maybe that's a new thing. Maybe RCC, we should go into the clipping kind of training. I don't know. Anyway, it's here with us. And I also heard the last craziest thing I heard this week was that the stems, they only use the leaves of the hemp. The stems that are sitting out in these fields around us, Nike is supposedly grinding them up and make shoes out of the hemp stems.
Really?
All parts of the buffalo, you know.
I'm telling you, if Nike could do that, that'd really be something. But anyway,
that's really cool.
as we go along here as well. Well, before we end our show here, we just want to remind you again of Firewise and we're going to have a fire year every year. We have a fire season every year. It does not change.
Yeah.
And we're going to have it again.
And when does that start, Katie?
It starts now. You need to be thinking about wildfire now, ultimately because the seasons are going to continue getting longer under a warming climate, drying climate, and with more development taking place, growing in all of these communities. Wildfire, you have to prepare for at all times of the year.
So start now?
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
February?
Start now. Yeah, with this false warm-up that we're having, a lot of folks are starting to ask about plants, and I've gotten an upkick in number of people asking for home assessments. Now's the time to start thinking about what you're landscaping around your home, the updates that you're going to make during that spring cleaning.
Yeah. Well, the program works really well in Ashland, so congratulations to you for what you do there. It really, don't you think? I mean, it's a great program in Ashland. People are very smart to take advantage of it. The problem is we got to get it to the rest of the county because Ashland is a small part of this entire area that could be affected by it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of proactive neighborhoods. I say Ashland has the highest density, but Jackson County as well is probably the highest density county of fire-wise communities in the country. And so there's a lot of concern and just a slow uptick with the change in culture regarding wildfire. This is a valley that's very concerned about wildfire and continues to see an increase in that.
Look at the areas around Merlin. Look at the areas.
That's a very good point.
Just in Josephine County, go down towards Cave Junction in those forest lands.
Yep.
There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes that I don't think people ever even imagine that they're there.
And I don't know that a lot of them are doing their defensible space. That how many feet around? What is the recommended?
We divide it into zones, so we tell you to start inward and work your way out. Start thinking about the first 5 feet around your home, those flammable plants that are reaching under your eaves, those grates that you have that aerate your crawl space. Make sure the screens are nice and dense so that embers can't get inside. Then you zoom out to 30 feet. Is there a lot of vegetation that could carry fire from within that 30 feet into the home? And then you scale out even further to 100 feet around your home. What's dense around your property that you can thin out to reduce the ability of flames to get closer to your home?
And we all do. When you walk into it, you're showing property to a potential buyer and a rural property. Don't you immediately, when you turn into a rural property, see whether they have done that? Whether the property has been cleared, whether it's safer for fire or not. Isn't that the first thing I look at?
Which is, I think, one of the reasons we felt that this newer relationship that we have at the fire department was so organic for us is because we have a heightened awareness.
Yeah.
We weren't necessarily experts on the subject or knowing as much as we could, should, and will know. But obviously we're concerned, and we hear defensible space, and we talk about it, and our clients are concerned about it. So this allows us to take it to the next level with real information, partner with the fire department that helps educate the consumer, which is really our value as realtors, is to help our buyers and sellers make informed decisions and help them make the right decisions. So to add this arrow to the quiver, I think is a really important step for Rogue Valley Realtors, Ashland Realtors, where it started, but we really do want to see this succeed throughout the county.
Yeah, absolutely. So good luck with that, Katie. And again, she'll come out. If you call her up, you got a waiting list. But they'll come out to your property there and actually help you and do that. So identify what's there and what's not. So that's really good. Before we get out of here, I just got to ask Colin, because he's here and he's like the past president. You're high up here in the rankings. About the governor and this 1%, and I don't even know if it's 1%, about her proposed real estate transfer tax. She's going to go up against a lot here for this. Why in the world would she do that?
In 2012, we implemented Measure 79, which specifically prohibited any kind of transfer tax on the sale of real estate, making us one of only 13 states in the nation that doesn't have a transfer tax. We already have very high property taxes in Oregon. We have a high state tax, and we don't get the relief any longer under the tax reform law that you can't write off additional taxes. We are capped at $10,000 per married couple or single individual, and our taxes, our state taxes and our property taxes, way exceed that. So it's kind of a double tax. So then to try and reverse that, the will of the people, and say, because it was almost 2/3 of the population.
79%, I think it was.
And that was a constitution.
Constitutional change, which is what they're looking for, and they're looking to put it on the backs. Now remember, when we did that, we also increased the fees of the recording paperwork on every sale transaction that was specifically supposed to go to affordable housing. So we worked with the governor and we said, we understand this issue is serious and we're willing to work with you on some other way, but not the taxation of the home on the transfer. So when you sell your home, you're going to pay a percentage to the state government that's supposed to go into that kitty. I think that there needs to be a better understanding of what affordable housing means in Oregon, and that the homeowner can't be the answer to all of those challenges.
It just seems so dumb to tax housing because you're going to make affordable housing out of it. It just doesn't
Well, we've
add up or work to
we've
me.
made some good inroads this year, last couple of years, on the affordable housing project as a state. So I guess it just caught me by surprise. It's like, why now? Why bring this up now?
Affordable housing is a challenge throughout the country. There
Oh,
is
yeah.
no silver bullet, and they attempted it with rent control, which has had the reverse effect. And this is another example. What legislators do really well is create legislation. And one of the things that they need to understand is that when you're overseeing, whether it's local legislators like in the city of Ashland, and you've got the city of Talent, and you've got the Jackson County, they're the ones that create the regulations that slow down development, that make it more costly to build. And so that's actually what they're good at. If they could take a closer look at what they're doing, specifically with regards to building code and slowing it down, and I'm not saying skip corners or the codes aren't important, they're extremely important, but there could be better efficiencies built into the process that would allow us to build more homes and take care of the affordable housing unit, other than saying, I'm going to take more money from you, from me, and make it all the more difficult for people.
Oh, you said it perfectly.
Yeah, just
I wish I could
streamline the
remember exactly what you
process,
said.
Well, listen to the show.
And again, and the reason it's important is that if this particular thing would go to the seller, would be responsible for the tax. Washington has one. California has one. Washington raised theirs again this year on the 1st of January. So again, it's easy to it's easy to tax, and I'm glad the Oregon Association of Realtors, I know, going to be there.
So will the National Association.
And the National Association. It's just I don't know why in the world Oregon has more revenue now than it's ever had in its history. More revenue, and we still want more. That's what kills me, and it comes on the backs of property owners, as you say. So anyway, we got to go. We can continue on this. Katie, thank you, Katie Gibble, for being here. Firewise in the city of Ashland. She's at Ashland Fire and Rescue. So we'll come back again and visit with us more about how you're doing with your program. Colin, thanks to you. Always nice to visit with you.
Thank you.
Alice, have a great week again as well. Thanks to Brett Nance, who handled our camera work today for our YouTube show, for all of his work. I'm Pete Belcastro for Alice Lema. Have a great week, everybody, and God bless you all.